Danielle Carter woke up that morning with a sense of relief. The week had been long and filled with small but tiring responsibilities, work calls that stretched late into the night, rushing her son Marcus to and from school, paying bills, and handling household chores. She had promised him something special for Friday afternoon, a picnic in the park. Marcus had been asking all week, "Mom, can we go to the park after school? Just you and me." He was 7 years old, full of energy, and loved simple things like throwing a frisbee, running in the grass, or watching ducks by the pond. Danielle had smiled and agreed. She wanted to give him those carefree memories, the kind that children hold close long after they grow up. By 4 p.m., the sun was warm but not too harsh. Danielle packed sandwiches, juice boxes, and a bag of chips into a simple picnic basket. She slipped her work laptop into the bag as well. She didn't expect to use it, but just in case an urgent email came through, she wanted to be prepared. Being a single mother had taught her the importance of balanced time for her child but also responsibility to her career. When she and Marcus arrived at the park, they found a shady spot under a tall oak tree. Families were scattered around, kids chasing one another on the playground, couples sitting on benches, joggers passing by with headphones. It was a normal, quiet afternoon. Danielle laid out a checkered picnic blanket, and Marcus immediately began unwrapping the frisbee with excitement. "Throw it to me, Mom," he shouted, his laughter echoing across the open space. Danielle laughed, too, tossing the frisbee back and forth, enjoying the sound of her son's joy. For a while, she forgot about everything else, forgot the stress of deadlines, forgot the weight she carried as both a parent and a professional. She was simply mom, and that was enough. But then, as Marcus began playing with some nearby kids, Danielle sat back down and opened her laptop. She checked her emails quietly, her eyes scanning through confidential updates that her team at the bureau had sent her. Of course, nobody around her knew she was an FBI agent. She had never felt the need to share that with strangers. To everyone else, she was just another mom with her child at the park. Still, Danielle carried herself with a certain calm confidence. Even when she appeared relaxed, she was always observant. She noticed the two men sitting near the basketball court, whispering and pointing at her. She noticed the mother on the bench who frowned in her direction after Danielle glanced at her phone. What she didn't know was that some people had already called local authorities. To them, Danielle didn't look like just a mom enjoying an afternoon with her son. They saw a black woman sitting alone, occasionally typing on a laptop, sometimes scanning the area. Their imaginations turned ordinary behavior into suspicion. It didn't take long before a police cruiser rolled slowly into the park. The sound of tires on gravel drew curious eyes. Marcus didn't notice at first, he was too busy chasing his friends near the slide. Danielle, however, noticed immediately. She always noticed. 2 officers stepped out, their hands resting casually on their belts. They walked directly toward her. She closed her laptop and folded her hands calmly on her lap. "Good afternoon, ma'am," one officer said. His voice was polite but carried a sharp edge. "Can we ask what you're doing here today?" Danielle blinked, keeping her tone even. "I'm having a picnic with my son." "Is there a problem?" The second officer glanced at her laptop bag. "We got a call about suspicious behavior. Some people said you've been sitting here with a computer, watching people." Danielle almost smiled at the absurdity of it. Watching people? She had barely looked up from her emails, except to check on Marcus. But she knew better than to argue. "I'm just enjoying the park," she said simply. The first officer wasn't satisfied. "Do you have ID on you?" "Yes," Danielle answered calmly. She reached into her purse and handed over her driver's license. The officer studied it carefully, then exchanged a look with his partner. "What do you do for work, Miss Carter?" he asked. "I work for the federal government," she replied, keeping her words vague. She wasn't about to announce her role as an FBI field agent to two strangers in a public park. The second officer raised an eyebrow. Federal government, hey? What department? Danielle didn't flinch. I'd prefer not to get into details here. That answer only deepened their suspicion. One of the officers muttered, "That's unusual. Most people don't avoid answering unless they're hiding something." Danielle felt the eyes of nearby parents and joggers turning toward her. She could hear whispers, "What's going on? Who is she? Did she do something wrong?" She could also see Marcus running back, noticing the police officers standing near his mom. His small face shifted from joy to confusion. "Mom," he asked softly. "Why are they talking to you?" Danielle gave him a gentle smile. "It's okay, Marcus. Go keep playing. I'll be right here." The officers weren't finished. They asked to see what was in her laptop bag. Danielle hesitated. She knew the files on her computer were confidential, meant for bureau eyes only. But refusing would only increase their suspicion. She decided to answer with patience. "This is my work laptop. I can't show you what's on it. But if you'd like, you can radio in my name and confirm who I am." The officers exchanged glances again. To them, her calmness wasn't reassuring, it was unnerving. Most people, when confronted by police, became nervous or defensive. Danielle, however, stayed collected. That puzzled them. "All right," one of them said at last. He pulled out his radio and called dispatch. "We've got a Danielle Carter here, possible suspicious behavior, says she works for the federal government. Can you run her name?" Danielle sat silently as her son watched from a distance. She felt the weight of the moment, not for herself but for Marcus. She didn't want him to remember this day as the time his mom was embarrassed in front of everyone. Minutes passed slowly. The officers stood waiting, arms crossed, while people continued to stare. Danielle kept her expression neutral, but inside she was reflecting, how quickly judgment comes. How quickly people assume. Finally, the radio crackled. The dispatch officer's voice sounded uncertain. We've got something here. Danielle Carter has high-level federal clearance." "Repeat, high-level clearance." The two officers stiffened, exchanging nervous looks. They hadn't expected that answer. Danielle stayed quiet, letting the silence hang. She could see the doubt in their eyes, the wheels turning as they tried to figure out who exactly she was. One officer finally cleared his throat. "Ma'am, could you tell us exactly what you do?" Danielle's calm eyes met his. "I think you'll want to make another call before I answer that." And in that moment, the story shifted. The officers thought they had confronted an ordinary single mother in the park. They had no idea they were speaking to an FBI agent whose quiet presence carried far more authority than their assumptions could imagine. The air grew heavier, as if everyone in the park could sense that something was about to change. The silence after the radio message felt heavy. The two officers who had come expecting a routine check were now uneasy. They had heard words that didn't fit the picture they had built in their heads: high-level clearance. It didn't match the image of a single mom sitting on a blanket in the park with sandwiches and a frisbee. Danielle Carter, however, sat calm and steady. She didn't rush to explain. Years of training had taught her the power of patience, the power of silence. People often revealed more when you gave them room to think. She looked at the officers with quiet eyes, neither challenging them nor backing down. Her son Marcus tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, are you okay? Why are they still here?" His little voice was worried, and Danielle stroked his hair. "I'm fine, baby. Go play. Everything's okay." She wanted him to feel safe, no matter what was happening around them. The officers stepped aside, whispering to each other. Their body language showed conflict, uncertainty mixed with defensiveness. One of them finally said, "Dispatch must have made some mistake. Clearance like that? Doesn't make sense. Danielle could hear him, but she said nothing. She knew what would come next. They would try to push further, demand more answers, because letting go would feel like admitting they were wrong. She had seen it before, not just in law enforcement, but in people in general. When someone built a picture in their head, it was hard for them to erase it. Miss Carter, one officer said more firmly, we need more than just your word. If you really work for the government, then tell us which agency. Otherwise, this is going to look worse. Danielle looked at him steadily. If you think it looks worse, call this number. She pulled out a small card from her wallet, the kind she was trained to carry for moments when verification was needed. Ask for Agent Ramirez. He's my supervisor. The officer took the card but hesitated. Calling the number meant risking embarrassment if she was telling the truth. Ignoring it meant continuing to look suspiciously at an innocent mother in front of a growing audience. Around them, people were whispering louder. A couple on the bench nearby exchanged glances. A jogger stopped, pretending to stretch but clearly listening. Some parents pulled out their phones to record, their cameras flashing red lights. Marcus noticed, too, his young eyes wide with confusion. Why are people filming us, Mom? Danielle's heart pinched for him. She didn't want him to see his mom cornered. She didn't want his childhood memories filled with moments of shame. But she also knew she had to hold her ground, not for pride, but for truth. The officer finally made the call. His partner stood stiff, arms crossed, pretending not to be nervous. After a moment, the officer's expression shifted. His voice, once sharp, softened. Yes, I'll hold. Then, after a pause, Agent Ramirez? This is Officer Daniels from the city precinct. We have a woman here, Danielle Carter, yes, oh. He swallowed hard. Oh, I see. Yes, sir. Of course. No problem. Thank you. He hung up and handed the card back awkwardly. His partner asked quietly, what did he say? The officer cleared his throat, avoiding Danielle's eyes. He confirmed it. She's an agent. There was a ripple of murmurs from the crowd. The mother on the bench who had frowned earlier now looked shocked. The jogger straightened up, shaking his head. Even some of the children paused their play, sensing something big had happened. Marcus beamed, not fully understanding but proud. See? I told you my mom's smart. He clung to her side, smiling as if he had won a prize. Danielle smiled back at her son but kept her expression measured with the officers. She didn't want to humiliate them, but she also wasn't going to excuse their assumptions. She simply said, thank you for making the call. That's all you needed to do. The officers looked embarrassed. One mumbled, we were just following procedure. Danielle tilted her head slightly. Procedure is fine. But assumptions are not. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm words carried more weight than anger ever could. The officers nodded stiffly, then stepped back, muttering something about finishing their patrol. They didn't look at her again. They didn't look at the crowd, either. They walked quickly back to their cruiser, starting the engine and driving off without another word. The air in the park shifted. The tension eased, replaced by curiosity and quiet respect. Some people kept staring at Danielle, whispering to each other. Others, realizing they had misjudged her, looked down awkwardly. A few gave her small nods of respect. Danielle exhaled slowly. She didn't enjoy moments like these. She didn't want recognition or drama. She only wanted to spend time with her son. But life had a way of pulling truth into the open, especially when people least expected it. She turned to Marcus and hugged him tightly. It's all over, baby. Let's eat our sandwiches, okay? But Marcus wasn't ready to let go. Mom, why did they think you were bad? You didn't do anything. His little eyes searched hers for an answer. Danielle knelt down, brushing his cheek with her hand. Sometimes people make quick decisions about others, Marcus. They don't always take the time to know the truth. That's why we have to stay calm and let the truth speak for us. He frowned, trying to understand, then nodded slowly. But you're the good guy, right? Danielle smiled softly. I try to be. That's all anyone can do. The rest of the picnic passed more quietly. Marcus ate happily, occasionally throwing his frisbee again, but Danielle stayed thoughtful. She thought about how easily things could have gone wrong. She thought about how many times people like her were questioned for simply existing in spaces where others thought they didn't belong. Her mind drifted back to her own childhood. She remembered growing up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce. She remembered her mother working double shifts, barely sleeping, just to keep food on the table. She remembered her father telling her, "You'll have to work twice as hard to be seen the same." Those words had shaped her life. Danielle had worked harder. She had studied longer. She had applied for the FBI Academy even when people doubted her. She had passed every exam, every physical test, every background check. She had earned her badge, not because of luck, but because of grit. And yet, even with all that, she could sit in a park as a mom and still be seen as suspicious. That reality weighed heavy. But Danielle wasn't someone who lived with bitterness. She lived with purpose. She knew her job wasn't just about chasing criminals, it was about showing her son, and others, what dignity looked like under pressure. As the sun began to dip lower, painting the sky orange, Danielle packed up their things. Marcus carried the frisbee proudly under his arm. They walked hand in hand toward the car. From behind, someone called out, "Excuse me." Danielle turned. It was the jogger who had been watching earlier. "I just wanted to say. I'm sorry for assuming things. I shouldn't have." Danielle gave him a kind smile. "Thank you for saying that. We all learn." And with that, she left the park. The day had started as a simple picnic. It had turned into something far more complicated. But it wasn't finished yet. The ripples of that afternoon would travel farther than she imagined. Because while Danielle wanted only peace, the world had a way of turning her quiet strength into a public lesson. And the next day, those lessons would begin to unfold. The next morning, the events at the park were still heavy in Danielle's thoughts. She tried to move through her routine like any other day, making breakfast for Marcus, packing his school bag, tying his shoelaces as he bounced with energy. But inside, she carried a quiet unease. Marcus had woken up earlier than usual, still full of questions. "Mom, will the police come again today? Are they still mad at you?" His innocent face carried both worry and curiosity. Danielle knelt down to meet his eyes. "No, sweetheart. They won't bother us again. Remember what I said? The truth always comes out." He nodded slowly, though she could tell he was still puzzled. Children understood fairness more than adults sometimes. To him, it was simple: his mom was good, so she shouldn't be treated badly. But Danielle knew the world wasn't always simple. She dropped Marcus off at school and drove to her office. The FBI building was plain on the outside, tucked between other government buildings, but to her it always felt like stepping into another world. As soon as she showed her badge at the security desk, the guards straightened, nodding respectfully. Inside those walls, her identity wasn't doubted. She was Agent Carter, respected, trusted, part of a team. Still, when she walked into the briefing room, she noticed the looks from her colleagues. News had traveled fast. A few agents nodded knowingly, others whispered. Finally, her supervisor, Agent Ramirez, motioned for her to step aside. "I heard what happened at the park yesterday," he said quietly. Danielle sighed. "I figured you would." Ramirez's expression was calm but concerned. "It was in the local incident report. And with bystanders recording on their phones, I wouldn't be surprised if it spreads online soon. Danielle frowned. That's the last thing I wanted. It was just supposed to be a picnic with my son. I know, Ramirez said gently. But sometimes, things like this become bigger than us. People see a story and it grows. Danielle didn't answer right away. She thought about the crowd at the park, the whispers, the recording phones. She thought about Marcus watching everything unfold. She had kept calm for him, but now the world might twist the moment into something she couldn't control. Her thoughts drifted back to when she first joined the bureau. She had been proud, but also nervous, aware that she stood out. At the academy, there had only been a handful of women, and even fewer women of color. She remembered the way some instructors had doubted her, questioning whether she had the physical or mental toughness to handle the role. She had proved them wrong, every step of the way. Yet even now, years later, she still faced the same invisible walls outside her work badge. Later that day, as Danielle was reviewing case files at her desk, her phone buzzed. It was a message from a friend in the community. "Danny, you're in a video online. People are sharing it everywhere." Her chest tightened. She opened the link and saw the scene from the park, captured on shaky cell phone footage. The clip showed the officers questioning her, showed her calm refusal to reveal too much, and ended with the dispatch confirming her clearance. The caption read, "Single mom in park harassed by cops, turns out she's FBI." The comments below were a mixture. Some praised her composure, calling her an inspiration. Others argued she should have just cooperated more. Still others debated whether the officers were wrong or just doing their job. Danielle closed the video. She didn't like being in the spotlight. But she also knew the video wasn't going away. It was now part of the conversation in her community. That evening, when she picked Marcus up from school, one of the teachers pulled her aside. "Miss Carter, I just wanted to say I saw the video. I'm sorry for what happened, but I admire how you handled yourself. You set an example for the kids, even when your son was watching." Danielle thanked her, though inside she felt conflicted. She hadn't set out to be anyone's example. She had only wanted to spend a quiet day at the park. But now the story was shaping into something larger. At home, Marcus had his own view. "Mom, you were like a superhero. Everyone saw you stay calm. You didn't even yell." He grinned proudly. "That's cooler than anything." Danielle hugged him tightly. "I'm glad you think so, baby." She wished the world were as simple as her son's heart, where staying calm and telling the truth was enough to make everything right. Over the next few days, the attention grew. Local reporters began calling, hoping to interview her. Community leaders reached out, asking if she would speak about what happened. Even some of her colleagues encouraged her. "People need to hear your perspective," one said. "This isn't just about you, it's about everyone who gets judged too quickly." Danielle hesitated. She wasn't looking for her fame. But she also realized she had an opportunity to turn an unfair experience into a lesson. If she spoke out, maybe someone else, some child, some parent, some young officer might think twice before rushing to judgment. Still, the pressure weighed on her. At night, when Marcus was asleep, she sat by her window with a cup of tea, reflecting. She remembered her parents' advice, the struggles of her younger years, the long road she had walked to reach this point. And she remembered the look on Marcus's face at the park, worried, then proud. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this isn't about me. Maybe it's about him, and kids like him." By the end of the week, Danielle agreed to attend a community meeting at a local center. It was advertised as a discussion on fairness, trust, and the need for understanding between citizens and police. She would share her story, not as an FBI agent, but as a mother who wanted her child to grow up in a better world. When she arrived, the room was full. Neighbors, parents, young people, even a few off-duty officers had come. The energy in the room was tense but hopeful. Everyone wanted to hear what she would say. Danielle took a deep breath as she walked to the front. She wasn't used to speaking about herself in public. Her work usually required silence, discretion, and blending into the background. But now, all eyes were on her. She began softly. A few days ago, I took my son to the park. We just wanted to enjoy the sunshine, eat sandwiches, and play. But instead, I was questioned. Not because I did something wrong, but because people assumed I didn't belong. The room grew quiet. People leaned in to listen. Danielle continued, her voice steady but gentle. I didn't tell the officers right away who I was. Not because I was hiding, but because I wanted to see if they would look beyond their assumptions. But they didn't. Not until they were forced to. She looked around the room, seeing both sympathetic faces and uncomfortable ones. I'm not here to blame. I'm here to remind us that our first picture of someone is not always the truth. Sometimes the person you judge is carrying more than you know. Sometimes she's a mother. Sometimes she's an FBI agent. But always, she's a human being. A soft murmur of agreement filled the room. Marcus, sitting in the front row, watched his mother with wide eyes. He was seeing her not just as mom, but as someone strong, someone who could stand tall in front of a crowd. The evening ended with applause, handshakes, and quiet thanks. People left talking about her words, some with new understanding in their voices. Danielle knew it wasn't the end of the story. In fact, things were only beginning to unfold. Because when truth meets the public, it spreads faster than anyone expects. And soon, her story would reach the days after Danielle spoke at the community hall felt different. Something had shifted. People she barely knew were now nodding to her in the grocery store, offering small smiles of recognition. At Marcus's school, other parents who once passed her without notice now greeted her warmly. Word of her story had traveled further than she expected. But not all reactions were easy. Some people praised her for staying calm, others criticized her for making the officers look bad. Danielle didn't pay much attention to the noise, but she could feel the tension building. She knew life had a way of testing a person once they stepped into the public eye. One afternoon, as she sat at her desk reviewing documents, her supervisor, Agent Ramirez, walked in holding a folded newspaper. "You've seen this?" he asked. She shook her head. Ramirez laid the paper down. On the front page was a picture of her at the community hall, standing behind the microphone. The headline read, "FBI agent speaks out, calm in the face of assumptions." Danielle sighed. "I didn't ask for this." Ramirez nodded. "I know. But sometimes stories choose us." He looked at her seriously. "The Bureau is aware of the attention you're getting. Leadership doesn't see it as a problem yet, but be careful. The public knows only pieces of the truth. And pieces can be twisted." That evening, Danielle tried to relax with Marcus. They ordered pizza, played a board game, and laughed. But even in those moments, her mind replayed the warning. She had chosen to speak honestly, but honesty came with weight. The next Saturday, Danielle decided to return to the park with Marcus. She wanted to show him that life could continue normally, that they didn't have to avoid places because of what had happened. Marcus was excited. He carried his frisbee under his arm like a badge of honor. When they arrived, Danielle noticed more stares than usual. Some people whispered, recognizing her from the newspaper or the video. But she ignored it, focusing on her son's laughter as he ran through the grass. After a while, a familiar sound caught her ear, the rumble of a police cruiser. She tensed slightly but forced herself to stay calm. The car parked nearby, and two officers stepped out. These weren't the same men from before, but she could see from their cautious movements that they knew who she was. One of them approached with a respectful nod. "Agent Carter." Danielle stood slowly. "Yes. I just wanted to say, what happened that day wasn't right. I wasn't there, but I've seen the reports. I think we can all learn from it. His voice was steady, sincere. Danielle studied him, then nodded. Thank you. That means something. Marcus tugged her hand. Mom, are they here to talk to you again? Danielle smiled at her son. This time, they're just here to say hello. The officer crouched down slightly, looking at Marcus with a kind smile. You've got a strong mom, kiddo. Be proud of her. Marcus grinned wide, puffing out his chest. I am. The officers left soon after, but the moment stayed with Danielle. It reminded her that not everyone resisted change. Some people were willing to see, to learn, to grow. Later that week, Danielle was called to a local TV station for a live interview. She didn't want the attention, but she understood its importance. Sitting in front of the bright lights, she spoke clearly, what happened to me wasn't unique. It happens every day to people who don't have badges or titles to protect them. The difference is, I had the privilege of being able to prove who I was. Others don't always get that chance. My hope is that we slow down, that we look at people fully before making decisions about them. The interview aired that night, and messages poured in emails, letters, phone calls. Some were supportive, others critical. But one message stood out. It was from a young woman who wrote, I saw your story. I want to join the FBI, but I always felt like I didn't belong. Now I believe I can try. Danielle read it twice, tears filling her eyes. That was the reason. Not fame, not headlines, not attention, just giving someone else the courage to keep going. As the weeks passed, Danielle's life settled into a new rhythm. She kept working her cases quietly, still blending into the background when she needed to. At home, she focused on Marcus, helping him with homework, cheering at his soccer games, reading bedtime stories. But she also noticed the lingering effects. In the park, people treated her differently now, some with respect, some with distance. At the grocery store, she overheard her name whispered. At work, her colleagues gave her admiring looks, but she knew admiration could quickly turn into expectation. One evening, as she walked Marcus home from school, he looked up at her and asked, Mom, are you famous now? Danielle laughed softly. No, sweetheart. I'm not famous. People just know a little more about me than before. But why? Marcus asked. You didn't try to be famous. She squeezed his hand gently. Sometimes, life puts us in the middle of a story we didn't choose. When that happens, all we can do is live it with honesty. Marcus thought about that, then smiled. Then you did good, Mom. Danielle smiled back, her heart full. For her, that was the only recognition that truly mattered. Still, she couldn't shake the sense that something else was coming. Life had taught her that every story had turns, and every turn revealed new truths. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain, whatever came, she would face it with the same calm strength she had shown in the park. Because Danielle Carter was not just a mom. She was not just an agent. She was both, and that balance. Weeks had passed since the day in the park, and life was slowly returning to a steady rhythm for Danielle and her son Marcus. Yet, the memory of that afternoon lingered in their lives like a shadow that refused to fade completely. The world had seen the video, the community had spoken, and now, there was a new layer to how people looked at Danielle Carter. She was no longer just another mother in the neighborhood. She was the woman who had been misjudged, who stayed calm, and who quietly revealed herself as an FBI agent. For Danielle, the attention was both a blessing and a burden. She never wanted to be a public figure. Her work demanded discretion, patience, and the ability to blend into situations unnoticed. But after everything, she couldn't blend in the same way anymore. People recognized her face. Some whispered, some smiled, and some even came up to thank her for showing strength. At Marcus's school, he too felt the ripple effect. His classmates had seen the video or heard their parents talk about it. Some kids teased him, calling him Agent Boy, while others admired him, saying, "Your mom's the coolest." Marcus handled it with pride most of the time, but there were days when he just wanted life to be simple again. Danielle understood. She wanted that too. One Friday evening, Danielle received a call from the community center. They were organizing a town-wide forum to improve trust between citizens and law enforcement. "Agent Carter," the coordinator said, "your voice would mean so much. People respect you, and this could help us take a step forward." Danielle hesitated. She had already spoken once before, but this was bigger. A larger crowd, more eyes, more expectations. Yet, she thought of Marcus. She thought of the kids in her community who deserved to grow up in a world where fairness was the standard, not the exception. And she thought of her own childhood, of her parents telling her that she had to be stronger, smarter, and calmer just to be seen equally. "I'll come," she finally said. The night of the forum, the hall was packed. Citizens filled the rows of chairs, while uniformed officers stood at the back. Local reporters set up cameras, their lenses glinting under the lights. Danielle walked in quietly, wearing a simple blazer and slacks, her hair tied back. She didn't want to look like a headline, she wanted to look like herself, a woman, a mother, and someone who cared deeply about the truth. When she stepped onto the stage, there was a hush. The moderator introduced her. "Tonight, we hear from Agent Danielle Carter, a woman who showed our community the power of calm strength in the face of assumptions." Danielle took a deep breath and began. "I didn't plan to be here. I didn't plan for any of this. All I wanted that day was to give my son a picnic in the park." Her voice was soft, but steady. "But life has a way of turning simple moments into lessons, for all of us." She paused, scanning the audience. She saw officers shifting uncomfortably, parents leaning forward, teenagers listening with wide eyes. "I was judged that day. Not because of what I did, but because of what people assumed. They didn't see a mom on a picnic. They saw suspicion. They saw something that wasn't there. And that assumption led to action." Danielle's eyes softened as she continued. "But here's the truth, we all make assumptions. Every one of us. The question is, what do we do after? Do we hold on to them, or do we look closer? Do we see the human being in front of us?" The room was silent. Danielle went on. "I had the privilege of proving who I was. A badge. A supervisor who answered the phone. But most people don't get that chance. They don't have an FBI title to clear their name. They only have their truth, and too often, that's not enough." She looked toward the officers standing at the back. "This isn't about blame. It's about growth. It's about slowing down and asking ourselves, am I seeing the full picture? Or just the one in my head?" Her words sank into the crowd. Some nodded, some stared thoughtfully, others shifted with unease. But everyone was listening. Danielle closed with a message that came from her heart. "I'm not just an agent. I'm a mother. I'm raising a son who deserves a world where people see him for his smile, his kindness, his dreams, not for assumptions. That's why I'm here. That's why we all should be here." When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. It wasn't loud or wild, it was steady, respectful, and heartfelt. After the forum, people lined up to thank her. Parents shook her hand, young people asked her questions, and even a few officers approached quietly. One officer said, "I'll admit, your story made me uncomfortable. But maybe that's what I needed." Danielle nodded, her expression kind. Growth always starts with discomfort. That night, as she tucked Marcus into bed, he looked at her with wide eyes. "Mom, I think you changed people's minds today." Danielle smiled, brushing his hair back. "Maybe. And maybe they'll change someone else's tomorrow." That's how it works. Life didn't become perfect after that. There were still moments when Danielle felt the sting of judgment, still days when Marcus asked questions about fairness that were hard to answer. But there was also hope. The forum led to new training sessions for local officers, new conversations in schools, and new awareness in the community. For Danielle, the greatest victory wasn't in headlines or applause. It was in the small things like Marcus telling his classmates proudly, "My mom helps people think better." It was in strangers smiling with genuine respect, not curiosity. It was in knowing that her calm strength had planted seeds of change. On a quiet Sunday morning, Danielle and Marcus returned once again to the same park. The air was fresh, the sun gentle, and the oak tree still stood tall. They spread out their blanket, opened their basket, and laughed as they tossed the frisbee back and forth. This time, there were no whispers, no stares, no officers pulling up in cruisers. Just a mother and her son, enjoying the simple joy of being together. As Danielle watched Marcus run through the grass, she felt a deep peace. She thought about how a single day, a single moment, had unfolded into something larger than she ever expected. And she realized something important: sometimes life tests you not to break you, but to reveal your strength. She whispered to herself, "The truth always comes out." And with that, Danielle Carter smiled, not as an FBI agent, not as a headline, but simply as a mother, grateful for the chance to raise her son with dignity, hope, and courage.